Okay, let's unpack this. We're not just talking about, firing up your console and playing the latest AAA release. We are going deep behind the scenes into one of the most demanding, uh, complex, and frankly, financially explosive industries on the planet, video
Yeah.
game development.
Yeah, it's an incredible time to be watching this space, honestly. The popularity of gaming isn't just skyrocketing, it's like becoming democratized. In the last decade, things have changed so much. The resources, the tutorials, the game engines you can just grab. They're now available for pretty much anyone with the time, patience, and, a good idea to start creating.
Absolutely. And think about the scale here. The global gaming market is worth hundreds of billions.
Yeah.
A huge chunk of that comes from platforms that actually empower users to be the creators, not just the consumers. So our mission today is to break down this whole big multi-step process of making a game. We're going to look at the big seven-stage path that a traditional massive studio might follow. And then we'll immediately contrast that with something like the incredibly fast-paced, user-generated content powerhouse that is Roblox.
Right. We want you, the listener, to really get that the complex skills needed to run a major studio. They're basically the exact same skills you need to succeed as an indie creator in a user-generated space. We've got detailed guides here covering those 7 crucial stages: the planning, the building, the sometimes brutal testing phases, and then we've got a deep dive into the massive creator economy of Roblox, looking at its workflow, its coding language, and maybe most importantly, how creators are actually using things like the developer exchange to turn that digital passion into, well, real-world cash.
Yeah, we're going from idea to iteration, concept to cash flow. Let's switch the game mode on. Okay, so before we even jump into the first official stage, we really need to clear up this classic industry confusion. It shows up everywhere, no matter how small the team. The difference between game design and game development. Our sources use a pretty neat way to think about it, calling it the rectangle versus square analogy.
Yeah, it's a good one. What's interesting is that game development is the whole process. It's the big picture, the overarching act of actually making the video game. It's the entire rectangle. It involves programming, engineering, 3D rendering, optimization, writing, testing, all of it. From that first spark of an idea right through to launch and even post-launch updates.
Okay, so if development is the big rectangle encompassing everything, then game design is like the specialized square tucked inside it. Design deals specifically with the conceptual side, the rules, the feel.
Exactly. The designer is asking the fundamental question: what should this game actually be? They define the mechanics, how jumping works, how combat calculates damage. They figure out the core concepts, the aesthetics, the characters, how the stages progress, the story. They create the blueprint, essentially. The developers, on the other hand, they're responsible for actually bringing those ideas to life. They ask, how do we build this thing? That's the coding, the programming, the physics engines, the rendering pipeline.
Right, and this distinction is super important. Even if you're, say, a solo creator on Roblox wearing both hats, you have to realize when you're switching from design mode, dreaming up the cool boss fight, to development mode, actually coding the physics for it, knowing the difference keeps your project focused. You got to nail the what before you can really execute the how.
And that what kicks off with the official first step in the whole process: conceptualization. This is the foundation. It's the backbone the entire game grows from. If this part is weak, the whole thing can collapse later on.
So when you pick a concept, you have to answer some key questions, right?
Yeah.
It's way more involved than just, I want to make a fun game.
Mhm.
You need to lock down things like, what genre is this? Survival sandbox, narrative RPG, high-speed arcade racer? Is it going to be 2D pixel art or like super detail 3D? Who are you making it for? Casual players, hardcore sim fans, younger kids? And what platform? Because designing for mobile is totally different from designing for a high-end PC.
Conceptualizing is the fun part, the dream part. But maybe the single most important early test is what the source calls idea proofing. This is kind of the brutal phase where you test if that dream is actually viable technically and financially. You might have the coolest idea ever for this massive procedurally generated open world fantasy game, but if you can't prove you have the time, the team, and the tech to build it, well, the idea itself isn't worth much.
This is where those harsh reality checks happen. For big studios, the stakes are really high here. They have to answer tough questions like, what's the estimated minimum cost? Do we have the tech, or do we need to license or build a whole new engine? How big does the team need to be, and for how long? Are we hiring outside specialists like composers or top-tier concept artists?
And of course, the big one, the ultimate viability test. How are we actually going to make money from this? Is it a one-time purchase? Subscription? Free to play with microtransactions? The whole project really hinges on nailing that answer early.
Right. For those big studios working under a publisher, think EA or Ubisoft, this proofing stage is absolutely non-negotiable. They often need to create something called a vertical slice. And this isn't just like a flashy trailer. It's a fully polished, playable chunk of the game. Maybe only 15 minutes long, but it has to show the final quality graphics, the core gameplay loop, the controls, and what makes it unique.
Yeah, a successful vertical slice proves two things to the publisher. One, the project is possible, and two, the team can actually execute the vision at the quality level they promised. If the slice looks incredible but crashes constantly, budget denied. If it plays smoothly but looks totally generic, budget denied. It really has to hit every single mark.
Now, indie studios, and this definitely includes successful Roblox creators, they have a bit more freedom since they don't have that publisher breathing down their neck. But the flip side is the huge challenge of securing their own funding, whether it's self-funding or using platforms like Kickstarter or Fig. But regardless of team size, that initial concept, that blueprint, it has to survive some serious scrutiny before anyone starts building anything major. Okay, so once the concept seems viable and maybe that vertical slice or a solid prototype looks promising, we move into the second major phase, pre-production. Our sources describe this as like a deep brainstorming session where the actual scope of the game gets locked down. This is where the creative dream starts bumping up against technical reality.
Exactly. Pre-production figures out how those concepts will actually be brought to life. This phase is all about bringing together the key departments: writers, artists, designers, engineers. And it forces them to cooperate and kind of confront each other's needs and limitations. This is where you're really building out the game design document, the GDD, which can become this massive living document detailing every mechanic, every character bio, every level layout.
And this stage is all about that cross-department synergy, right? Where
Yeah.
technical limits have to meet the story and art ambitions. This is often where the first real friction happens, and it's crucial to sort it out early.
Let's use that great example from the source. The writers might spend months mapping out this amazing complex story that ends with this epic 500-person battle in the capital city. Protagonists, backstories, tons of side quests leading up to it. But then the engine engineers step in with the hard truth. They might say, look, due to technical limits, rendering, network bandwidth, we physically cannot have more than, say, 100 characters on screen at once without the game just tanking or crashing on most machines.
Wow, okay. So that one technical constraint immediately forces the writers and designers to completely rethink that whole sequence. Maybe that huge battle becomes a series of smaller fights, or maybe the story changes so the big battle happens kind of off-screen. It's this fascinating balancing act between tech reality and creative compromise.
Right. And meanwhile, the artists and designers are finalizing the visual side. They're locking down the final look, the specific color palettes, the lighting, the texture quality, the overall art style, making sure it's consistent across everything. And the developers are finalizing the core mechanics and physics systems using that GDD as their Bible.
And while all this technical planning is happening, you still have project managers trying to figure out the joy factor.
Yeah.
This elusive question of fun. They might set up initial metrics like how often a player uses a certain ability or how long they stick around, but the source points out that the real unquantifiable fun factor is incredibly hard to measure until way later, usually during intense testing.
Yeah, and before they commit to full-scale building, they do a lot of prototyping. This is like rapid, rough draft creation focused just on the core stuff. Prototyping the player's movement, testing different UIs, trying out control schemes on different devices, checking how unique features, like maybe a grappling hook or a complex crafting system, actually feel and interact with the world.
Prototyping is basically the industry's safety net. It's the let's see if this actually works before we pour years of resources into it moment. Iterating on a rough prototype that took a week to build is exponentially cheaper than iterating on a fully rendered character model that took 6 months.
Which brings us inevitably to the absolute biggest stage of them all, production. If pre-production is drawing the blueprints, production is the full-on construction site.
Yeah, this is the meat and potatoes. Production eats up the vast majority of the time, the effort, and the money, often taking several years for a big AAA title to get right. This is where you have hundreds of specialized people working simultaneously on different parts.
Oh, the workloads are immense. In the art department, character models are created, they're meticulously rigged for animation, rendered in 3D, and then iterated on like dozens of times until they perfectly fit the story and work within the engine's limits. Level designers aren't just drawing maps, they're crafting these dynamic, immersive worlds. They have to cater to different playstyles, place narrative triggers correctly, manage how assets load so it doesn't lag.
And the audio design team. doing incredibly detailed work that most players don't consciously notice, but it's essential for immersion. Think about just footsteps, making sure the sound dynamically changes if you're walking on a metal grate versus gravel versus mud. Plus all the UI sounds, enemy alerts, atmospheric music cues. It's huge.
And at the same time, you've got performance capture and voice acting happening. Skilled voice actors reading thousands upon thousands of lines of dialogue, trying to capture the right emotion, timing, tone for every single line, and managing that consistency across recording sessions that might be months or even years apart.
And running underneath all of this is the core development team. Developers writing literally hundreds of thousands of lines of source code, bringing every single thing to life, from basic movement physics to super complex AI behaviors. And you need project managers constantly setting sprint schedules and milestones, breaking that massive multi-year project into manageable 2-week chunks just to keep everyone accountable.
But here's the thing that really jumped out from the sources, and it speaks volumes about the emotional and professional toll of this industry. The frustration of iteration.
It's the brutal, cold reality of game development, isn't it? It's apparently incredibly common for huge chunks of a game, maybe a whole combat system, an entire level, a complex story branch representing months of work from dozens of people, to just be completely thrown out after being technically finished.
Exactly. Why? Because something discovered way later, usually during internal playtesting, proves that element just isn't fun. Or maybe it breaks the balance of the larger game. Can you imagine the burnout? A team having to scrap 6 months of their work because a feature, no matter how well built it was, just undermines the core experience. It really highlights the sheer punishing dedication needed in this phase.
Yeah, that emotional reality check leads us perfectly into the next critical step, the one that often decides which parts of production actually survive: quality assurance, QA, and playtesting. A game is absolutely not ready for even a limited public showing until it's been tested and tested and tested again.
Playtesters were basically the first line of defense against shipping a broken, or arguably worse, a boring game. They work methodically through every level, every location, meticulously checking for the huge list of potential problems. This includes obvious stuff like rendering glitches or logic errors, but also the notoriously tricky collision detection, making sure you can't just walk through walls or fall through the floor. That's a common source of exploits.
Right. And they also look for ways players could cheat or break the game's economy. Places where you could get stuck forever. Or even just dialogue that feels clunky or out of place.
And we learned there are 2 really important types of testing that go on here. First, there's stress testing. This is like adversarial testing. QA teams actively try to break the game. They might try to overload the system by spawning hundreds of items, or run into a wall for hours hoping to find a physics bug, or rapidly mash complex commands the engine wasn't quite designed for. They're hunting for weaknesses.
And then there's the absolutely crucial fun factor testing. This is where playtesters evaluate the core gameplay loop itself. Is the difficulty right? Too hard? Too easy? Is the reward system, the loot, the XP, the story payoff actually compelling when you finish a quest or beat a boss? The sources are super clear. A technically perfect game that just isn't fun, it won't sell. It has to be enjoyable.
So after rounds of iteration based on testing, fixing hundreds of bugs, tweaking mechanics, the game eventually moves towards its first public appearances, the late alpha or beta release. An alpha is usually feature complete, but still pretty unstable. A beta is generally feature and content complete, with the focus shifting to squashing those last high-priority bugs before the official launch.
And all this happens before the often difficult pre-launch hype and distribution period. This phase apparently is filled with intense developer anxiety. You start wondering, will people actually find this fun after all this work? Will they immediately find new game-breaking bugs we missed? Will our marketing even get noticed?
For a big studio, marketing is usually handled by the publisher. They create those slick, hype trailers mixing dramatic cinematics with gameplay snippets, and they book huge, expensive booths at major conferences like E3 or PAX, giving exclusive early looks to the press and attendees.
Indies, though, especially those on platforms like Roblox, have to rely more on things like crowdsourcing, direct community engagement, and really targeted ads. A super common and effective tactic now is sending early access beta keys to big online gaming personalities, streamers, YouTubers, so they can play it live for their huge audiences, leveraging that organic social buzz.
Then comes the big moment, launch. The months leading up to the official release date are famously known as crunch time. This period is almost entirely dedicated to just squashing massive backlogs of bugs, old ones, new ones that popped up when everything finally got integrated.
Studios have to prioritize right. They use a clear hierarchy. Anything that's a game crashing, bug stops you playing, blocks progress, that's always top priority. Minor visual glitches or stuff that doesn't really impact gameplay lower down the list. And alongside the bug fixing, developers are doing that final polishing touch for immersion. This is where they might deepen the mountain ranges in the background, improve some textures, make sure the trees sway nicely in the wind, small details that add up.
But the work absolutely, definitely does not stop once the game ships. Post-launch support is critical for survival in today's gaming world. It's kind of standard practice, unfortunately, for games to launch with some remaining small flaws. So the first few months are all about detecting and fixing those, often relying heavily on players submitting detailed bug reports through forums or in-game tools.
And for a game to really last, to thrive beyond that initial launch window, it needs regular software updates. This includes vital game balancing patches, tweaking weapon damage or character abilities based on how millions of people are actually playing the game live, and critically, new downloadable content, DLCs.
Yeah, releasing new stuff, new levels, new story chapters, new multiplayer modes, seasonal events, that's just standard business now. It massively boosts a game's replay value, brings back players who might have drifted away, and keeps the game looking fresh for new buyers. The successful studios in launch isn't the finish line, it's really just the starting gun for years of ongoing work.
Okay, so we've walked through those 7 big steps: conceptualization, proofing, pre-production, production, testing, launch, post-launch, that whole traditional, sometimes years-long, multi-million-dollar studio process. But now, let's pivot to a platform that is totally shaking up that landscape by kind of shrinking those steps and opening them up to literally everyone.
Okay.
Roblox. It really is a creator-driven revolution.
Yeah, the difference is pretty dramatic. While AAA studios are spending like 5 years and maybe $200 million on one game, Roblox creators are iterating and publishing experiences sometimes in just months, using the platform's own tools and infrastructure. The Roblox story itself is fascinating. Founded way back in 2004, initially called Dynablocks by David Baszucki and Eric Cassell. It launched publicly as Roblox in 2006.
And crucially, right from the beginning, the idea wasn't about them providing the content. It was focused on user-built multiplayer experiences using basic physics and scripting tools they provided. It quickly evolved from just a sandbox into this huge metaverse-like ecosystem where the users create basically 100% of the content people engage with. It stopped being just a game and became this platform for creation, socializing, and importantly, commerce.
The scale is just mind-blowing and shows you it's a serious business. Roblox generated something like US $3.6 billion in revenue in 2023. We're talking tens of millions of active daily users and hundreds of thousands of developers around the world actively creating on the platform.
And all that success hinges entirely on the UGC engine user-generated content. It's decentralized creation working on an unbelievable scale.
The stats on UGC volume are jaw-dropping. They really illustrate the speed here. In 2022 alone, users created roughly 170,000 virtual clothing and accessory items and 15,000 virtual worlds every single day. It just shows the platform isn't relying on a few big studios. It's built on rewarding this widespread creativity and fast-paced entrepreneurship. Creators design their games and items using Roblox's tools, publish them, and can monetize them directly.
And that democratization really ties into its cultural impact, too. It's way more than just a place for simple games now. It's a social hub. You've got major brands building virtual worlds there, virtual concerts happening, educational stuff, just places for people to hang out.
And for younger users, it's become this amazing learning ground. It bridges that gap between having fun and learning actual future-proof skills. It attracts kids and teens and organically teaches them real-world stuff like game design, programming basics, even entrepreneurship, all in a relatively low-stakes environment. We see these incredible stories like Alex Balfance, who started scripting on Roblox as a young teenager and created Jailbreak, which became one of the platform's biggest hits ever. It shows these are valuable, marketable skills being learned.
And that success is directly linked to the monetization structure. Unlike traditional game dev, where you usually need a publisher to handle payments and distribution, Roblox shares a cut of the revenue directly with the creators. This means an individual or a small team can actually earn real professional-level income from their digital creations. It makes that dream of being a game developer accessible much, much earlier. Okay, let's get practical then. If you're listening and thinking about diving into this creation space, you need to understand the tools and the workflow, which kind of mirrors those 7 traditional steps we talked about, but, compressed and simplified. It all starts with Roblox Studio.
Right. First step is downloading Roblox Studio. It's free, runs on Windows and macOS. It's basically the all-in-one integrated development environment, or IDE, for the platform. Once you log in with your regular Roblox account, the first real hurdle is just getting comfortable with the interface. You gotta learn your way around. The Explore window shows you all your game objects and assets in a hierarchy. The Properties panel lets you tweak their details like color, size, physics settings. The Toolbox is where you can grab pre-made assets and models. And crucially, the Scripting panel is where you write the code that makes everything happen.
And that code is written in Lua, right? Specifically a Roblox version called Lua. While the source did mention there are some non-coding tools out there for absolute beginners, if you want to do anything serious or potentially make money, Lua is pretty much essential. It's considered relatively simple to learn, as programming languages go, but you still need those fundamentals. Understanding variables, how to write functions, and especially event handling, the logic that says when the player clicks this button, then run this piece of code.
So once you're set up, you immediately loop back to that very first traditional step: conceptualization and planning your scope. You need to decide your genre simulator, .obby course, .tycoon game, and .social hangout. And the key tip here, especially for solo or small indie creators, is vital. Start small and iterate. Seriously. Smaller, polished games tend to succeed much faster than huge, overly ambitious projects that never get finished. Get a simple concept working, test it, publish it, and then use player feedback to improve and expand it over time.
Then comes the actual building. You use Studio's 3D tools to shape the world, sculpting terrain, setting up lighting, placing models. You can use assets from the toolbox, which saves a ton of time. But the source had a big warning here. Be really careful with free models. You have to check their quality and, importantly, their security. Poorly made or even malicious models can introduce bugs or exploits into your game without you realizing it. Making your own custom models, maybe in external software like Blender, gives your game that unique look that helps it stand out.
And then the real core of the development phase, scripting the crucial mechanics. This is writing the Lua code for everything player movement, building the user interface, UI, managing any in-game economy, and the really complex part, handling multiplayer synchronization so everyone sees the same game state at the same time without crazy lag.
Which brings us to probably the single most important technical and security tip for anyone wanting to develop on Roblox. You absolutely must understand and correctly implement the separation between client and server logic. This is often the difference between a successful, secure game and one that gets ruined by exploiters in, like, 5 minutes.
Let's break that down. The client is the player's device, their phone, their computer. It handles showing the visuals and telling the server what the player is trying to do. The server is the secure, Roblox-managed computer that actually dictates the true state of the game. If you trust the client too much, like if the player's computer tells the server, hey, I just instantly teleported across the map and grabbed 1,000,000 gold, and the server just believes it, that's a massive security hole, an exploit waiting to happen.
So the crucial best practice is to keep all the important logic, the decision-making, on the server side. The client can request an action, like I press the attack button. No. But the server must validate that request. Is the player actually close enough to attack? Do they have enough energy? Is the attack allowed right now? One developer in the source material specifically warned that failing to validate client actions, letting the client claim high scores or huge amounts of currency without server confirmation, was exactly how exploiters destroyed their game's economy. It's like QA and secure development rolled into one critical step.
Right. So once your game is built, debugged, and reasonably secure, you start thinking about the virtual economy. This is the path from just making a game for fun to potentially running a business. Players use the platform's currency, Robux, to buy things, items, special passes, temporary boosts. Roblox takes a cut for running the platform, obviously, but the creator gets the rest.
And the revenue model typically focuses on two main things. First, game passes. These are usually one-time purchases that give permanent perks like access to a VIP area or some unique gear that doesn't wear out. And second, developer products. These are consumables players buy repeatedly, things like speed boosts, extra lives, or packs of in-game currency.
Successful developers know it's not just about selling stuff once, it's about retention, keeping players coming back. They use techniques like daily login bonuses, maybe even subscription options for ongoing benefits, and most importantly, constantly updating the game with new content to keep players engaged. Because engaged players are more likely to make those consumable purchases over time.
And for creators really aiming for that professional level, wanting to earn actual real-world income, there's the Developer Exchange, or DevX. This is the official program that allows eligible developers to convert the Robux they've earned from their games into real cash.
The eligibility rules here are pretty strict, which signals this is serious business. You need to have earned a significant minimum amount of Robux. The source mentioned at least 30,000 Robux as an example threshold. And you have to meet rigorous account standards, including age verification and a clean record of following all the community rules. It ensures only established, compliant developers can cash out.
And this is how the really successful Roblox developers scale up.
Yeah.
They effectively turn their game creation into a full-time business, forming their own small, agile mini studios right there within the Roblox ecosystem. They might use their Robux earnings to hire other specialized creators, builders, scripters, artists. They release multiple games, they analyze data to optimize how they monetize, and they cross-promote their games to build a brand, kind of like a traditional publisher manages his portfolio.
But yeah, the journey isn't easy. It comes with significant challenges mirroring the competitiveness of the wider games industry. Because the Roblox ecosystem is so massive, competition and discoverability are incredibly tough. There are literally millions of games out there, and many of them are very good.
You can't just build a great game and hope people find it. You need good metadata, a really eye-catching icon, a clear searchable description, relevant tags to help players discover your game in the first place, and smart marketing is absolutely essential, using Roblox's own ad system, building a community on platforms like Discord, maybe collaborating with influencers. It's very similar to how big studios handle their pre-launch hype.
On top of that, technical quality is just non-negotiable. Players expect games to run smoothly on whatever device they're using, PC, mobile, maybe even console now. Poor optimization, constant lag, frequent bugs that will kill player retention faster than anything. A laggy game is basically a dead game on Roblox.
So the secret sauce, according to the developer insights we looked at, isn't just about complex coding skills. It's really about understanding your audience, updating your game frequently based on their feedback, and monetizing in a smart way. That means things like game passes and cosmetic items that add value or personalization, but without being overly aggressive or feeling like a pay-to-win scheme, especially given the younger audience on the platform and Roblox's strict policies around that. It's a delicate balance. Keep iterating, listen to your community, and market effectively. #tag outro. Wow, okay. That was a really extensive deep dive. We've covered those 7 huge universal steps of traditional game development, from the initial concept and that tough idea proofing needing a vertical slice, through the massive effort of production and testing, all the way to pre-launch hype and the crucial post-launch DLC needed for longevity.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway is seeing how much that complexity, that traditional process, actually applies directly to the UGC model too. Roblox gives you the tools and this incredible built-in audience, which lowers the barrier to entry massively. But the skills you need, the planning, the iterative testing, the security awareness, the monetization strategy, they're fundamentally the same skills used by the biggest studios in the world. You're learning real industry-level skills on Roblox, skills that let you engage with actual entrepreneurship and potentially earn real money through DevEx.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, the path to becoming a game developer, whether you end up working in a huge studio building or as an indie creator on Roblox, it really boils down to turning your imagination into a viable, working, thoroughly tested, and polished product that people genuinely want to spend their time and maybe their money on.
And what's truly fascinating, especially in the Roblox space, is that while technical skill is obviously necessary, creativity and finding unique angles seem to be the real keys to getting noticed in a universe packed with millions of other games.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on. If you were going to start creating a new game on Roblox right now, what unique personal interest or niche hobby could you combine with Roblox Studio? Something maybe a bit obscure or highly specialized or even historical. Something that could help your game genuinely stand out from the crowd in that massive creator universe. Go find that niche. Use those industry skills we talked about today and start building.